Okay, welcome back, everybody. Our next presenter is the Vice President of Learning and Development for Govloop, which is the leading knowledge network for public sector professionals. He's been involved for 14 years. And he's really helped the Govloop community grow to over 100,000 members. He works on a government-wide virtual learning program, and he's traveled around the world to present on various topics, such as using social media, diversity, and virtual mentorship. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Andrew Krzmarzick.
Well, good morning, everyone, and just want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you to Ryan Kobolars for inviting me to be here today. Also, thank you to David Rice, who recommended me and Govloop as a potential speaker. And I just want to thank you in advance for your attention and your insights. I'm going to, at some point, if we have time, ask for your insights on my topic, which is accelerating your government career with social media. By show of hands, how many of you are on social media? Use some form of social media? I thought I'd see every hand go in the air. I think it's pretty ubiquitous at this point. I think we all use at least one of the social media channels to communicate with friends, families, and colleagues. And speaking of family, my social media story really in many ways begins with my mom. We both were, in about 2006, starting to do some blogging. And she said, hey, have you heard of this blogger? He's a relatively famous blogger, that you ought to just reach out and see if you could get some advice from him on sort of improving your brand and elevating your career using social media. So I reached out to him, and he was very nice. He was actually relatively famous at the time, and I thought he probably had a lot of followers, a lot of people who were reading his blog, so I was surprised that he got back to me. But he did kind of push me in another direction. He said, you ought to meet this guy named Ari Herzog. He is doing a lot of stuff around social media in government, and you two ought to hook up. So through Twitter and LinkedIn, I reached out to Ari, and we were able to communicate back and forth a little bit through those channels. And ultimately, he said, hey, I'm presenting at a conference in Washington, D.C. in a few months. Would you like to co-present with me? My career was just getting started at the time in terms of being on the speaking circuit. I was speaking about generational diversity in government, telework, and social media. But this was probably the main conference where I really wanted to get an opportunity. I'd missed the deadline to be able to speak, so I was grateful that he gave me the opportunity to co-present with him. Well, it was at that event that I met a guy named Steve Ressler. He was at the Department of Homeland Security, and he had created something called Young Government Leaders, which was a happy hour that became a series of training sessions, and then is now a 501c3 nonprofit with chapters all over the country. And it's designed for people who are rising leaders in government. So I met him, and we became friends, and he'd also created something called Govloop, which was a social network for government employees. At that point, in 2008, it was just a hobby of his. He was doing it in the evenings and the weekends. I was a volunteer then, early on, in that Govloop network. But what's happened is, in 2009, Govloop was acquired by GovDelivery, a company called GovDelivery, and this truly became his sort of $1 million idea, where we now have 30 employees, and we're doing a lot of great things for government. But really, this is my sort of channel to success, if you will. And I owe it all to, as you can see, a lot of different social media tools. Early on, I leveraged blogging to position myself as a thought leader. I would basically learn a little bit about maybe Twitter or something and how government was using it, and I just blog about that. I didn't know too much more than anybody else, but I was just willing to sort of share what I was learning at the time with a broader community, and I was able to then sort of position myself effectively. And so I'm really grateful to social media for where I am in my career today, and ultimately I do work for a social network So really at the center of social media in government. So that's a little bit about my story. Here's the stats. I mean, it's harder and harder to get a job these days. And this was borne out in a survey that was conducted by JobVite, where they asked people, are you finding it easier or harder to find a job? And you can see the results. 4 out of 10 said it's much harder. You start getting down to, just somewhat harder, 22%, but that's, relatively, that's what, 60% of job seekers saying it's pretty hard to get a job out there. So how do you rise above? How do you differentiate yourself? How do you meet the right people? Because we all know it is who you know that helps you advance your career. You can see in my story that was true. And I'm sure that you have stories in your life and in your career that would be similar. So here's what I want to do for the next 40 minutes or so. I just want to walk through a few tools that I've used. Nothing is going to be rocket science. Probably a lot of scientists in the room. You're probably smarter than me on a lot of subjects. I'm just going to give you some tips. They're going to be very practical. And all I really want you to do is pick 3 or 4 that you're like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about doing that in a while. Write those down and take an action in the next couple days. I find that if you can commit to an action in 24 to 48 hours, you're able to make a difference. Otherwise, you leave the event and the excitement of the event and you don't do something. But I do hope that you will take 3 or 4 actions today that will help you advance your career using social media. So let's start with LinkedIn, because I feel as if next to Govloop for government specifically, LinkedIn is probably the best social media, best social network to help people advance their careers. So number 1 is just update your profile. If you haven't been there in a while, or maybe you have, but you just haven't taken the time to update your profile, I have a real-time example of how this can be very, very powerful. I recently got a promotion at Govloop. I was the director of learning and development and sort of got a title change to vice president at Govloop. And so I posted that on LinkedIn. And then I updated my biographical information. And I got like 130 likes on this thing. It was like my birthday on Facebook, but on LinkedIn. Just by changing my title and changing a little bit of my biographical information to bring that up to date. Also had a bunch of people make comments, people that I'd been trying to connect with. I was linked to them, but I'd reached out and I was trying to get meetings, but they happened to see that update. They congratulated me, and it opened a door for me to then connect with them. People like chief learning officers in government, who, as I'm trying to elevate in my career, that's the sort of the next level up. And so I was actually pretty surprised at how effective just changing a profile could be on LinkedIn. So that would be the number 1 advice I'd have for you, is just go make a few tweaks and see what happens. Number 2 is keep in touch. Actually, on a weekly basis, I try to be intentional about doing one of 3 things. So number 1 would be on your left, there's the Talent Grow Show. And this is just an example of somebody who has provided an update on LinkedIn. And so this is a great opportunity to just say to Haley, hey, congratulations. That's fantastic that you launched this podcast show. I look forward to tuning in. I hope it's a success for you. Just that little thing goes a long way, because if you think about maybe the number of people that she's connected with, if I'm one of just a couple handfuls of people who comment, I stand out from the crowd. Another one would be Sydney Smith-Heimbrock. We have invited her to speak in an event we're hosting at Govloop on April 21st. She had commented on my title change, which was pretty cool. And so I just want to take some time and endorse her. There's the opportunity to, it says here, does Sydney have these skills or expertise? And so just taking a couple seconds to click a couple of those, and then she'll see that. She's like, oh, that was really nice of him to acknowledge me for that skill area. You'd be surprised at how the little things go a really long way. And then third, when you land on your homepage in LinkedIn, it has this little box now. I think this is actually relatively new, where it just has, like a person and something that's changed in their career. So for instance, Eric Gruber has a new job. So could I either just like or comment on that connection? And then it says there are 15 other ways that I could keep in touch with him. So I'm trying to explore that. And again, you can do like 45 seconds worth of some micro actions that make a difference in reaching out to people in your network. Third is I would encourage you to connect with context. It's really easy to just sort of go with the defaults here. There's sort of some standard language that LinkedIn has in this box when you go to link with somebody. But even if it's a sentence, I find that it's helpful to say, for instance, in this example, hey, Dan, we met at the HR conference last week, and I'd like to stay in touch. That in and of itself helps you to stand out from the crowd, as other people are maybe just like, LinkedIn has a great recommendation engine, right? It shows you people that you can connect with, and you can do it pretty quickly. But I find that if there are people that are particularly important to you that you want to stay in touch with, it's worth personalizing that message back to them. It also, when you make it more personal, it encourages them to respond to you. If they see that you just sort of use the form language, they're like, that's just another person trying to connect with me. But if you personalize it, it creates a need for reciprocity there, where they could respond in kind. And I think it accelerates the development of that relationship. Fourth, I would say that you would want to leverage groups. Now, let me, before I talk about groups on LinkedIn, give this caveat. Groups on LinkedIn are generally a mess. You know what I'm talking about if you've been there. It's a lot of spam. People are just posting like their stuff, trying to promote their events, what's going on with them. And so when I say leverage groups, I would say don't do that. I would say ask legitimate questions about challenges you're having on the job, or seek to find people who are asking those kinds of questions and respond from your area of expertise. Again, with all of the spam that's going on in LinkedIn groups, that's another way to stand out. And I think that's really the name of the game here on social media, is to differentiate yourself from the crowd. Here's a guy who successfully leveraged groups. His name is Jeffrey Vargas. He is now the Chief Learning Officer at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. At the time when he, in November 2008, he was pretty senior, not chief level yet, but pretty senior program manager at Department of Energy. And he realized that, I think maybe he even had just gotten his first CLO title, but he realized that there was no CLO network on LinkedIn at the time. So he thought, I'll stand that up, and this would be pretty cool if I could get like 20, 30 other CLOs to sign up. We can connect. We can ask questions of one another, share best practices. And here's what he says. I started the group because nothing was in existence in LinkedIn, and our community needed something, a place, a forum, something to communicate around ideas. So he did it, and within a year, it grew to 2,000 members. He was invited to very special events, like he got invited to this exclusive event in Tucson, Arizona for only like 50 CLOs. He just had positioned himself very effectively as a thought leader and as a leader in his field and among his peers. And so I'd venture to guess that most groups exist. I would imagine there's a deaf in government group. Maybe there's not, though. Maybe you could be the one to start that. Maybe you want to actually talk to the leadership of deaf and hard of hearing in government before you do that. Again, I didn't do a search or anything, but maybe there's an area of expertise that you have and you want to search for a group. And if you find that there isn't one, maybe you're the one who starts it. So let's talk about Govloop. It's what I know best among social networks, having worked there for 6 years and then being a volunteer for a year before that. So really, Govloop is designed to help government employees do their jobs more effectively. It's a place where you can share best practices. The original hypothesis was that Govloop would be a social network where you'd create a profile and people would blog and they'd connect with one another, similar to how you do it on Facebook. But what it's really become is a continuous learning hub. What we call ourselves now is not a social network, but a knowledge network. This is where legitimate exchange of ideas and concepts is happening, where that generational knowledge transfer from the boomers to the next generation is truly happening. It started out as just Steve and an idea. It grew to 20,000 members in a year, acquired by GovDelivery, and now we have over 200,000 members from federal, state, local government, international governments, as well as anybody in and around government from private sector, nonprofits, academia, who are interested in making government better. So you can see here from our homepage that we have some blogs and we have some good information there. We also have online trainings that we host. We have in-person training events. In fact, there's an event happening downtown today around geographic information systems. that we're hosting. And then we try to produce learning collateral, learning resources like research guides. A lot of them are on tech-based topics because that's where we're able to get sponsors. But we also have a lot of great practical information around like productivity tips, project management, public speaking skills, really anything and everything that's designed to help you, as I said, do your job better as a government employee. So I'd encourage you to check it out. It's at govloop.com. By show of hands, how many Govloop members do we have in the crowd? Okay, if you are a Govloop member, I'm going to incentivize you. Or if you have a smartphone or a tablet or on a laptop right now, if you join or are a member, and you can show me that afterwards, I will collect your email and we will be in touch, and I will send you a special swag package. Sound good? If you join, I will incentivize that. Or if you are already a member, I'll send you some swag, t-shirts, stickers, some cool stuff that we like to give out to sort of VIP members. All right. And again, by the way, it's free to join, so there's no cost here. And that's what we've been trying to do, is provide, everything, all of these resources to you for free, no cost, because we know there are limited training budgets, and we know that you're limited in travel. So this is your way to connect to people and information in real time. One other quick note about Govloop and how I want you to think about it is, when you have a problem on the job, you have a challenge, you're like, I'm not sure how to solve this. Typically what you're going to do is you're going to go to Google and you're going to conduct a search. I would encourage you to go to Govloop and conduct the search there. Instead of Googling it, Govloop it. Get Smart Part 2 is seeing the success that we had on Govloop. In particular, we had 30,000 people sign up last year for our free online trainings, our free webinars that happen pretty much every week to every other week. And so doubling down on that kind of content, sort of this free virtual training, we are standing up something called Govloop Academy. We're launching it on April 15th. We're in beta right now. If you want to go take a look, I would love for you to give us feedback. Actually, as a unique target audience for us, I'd love for you to share with us your experience of it as deaf and hard of hearing in government. That would go a long way to help us to, since we're still in beta, to make some tweaks that make it a better experience for you. So you can go to academy.govloop.com. Academy.govloop.com. Again, it's in beta, so we're still working out some kinks. Academy.govloop.com. And start taking some of the courses there and give us feedback. You know, actually, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that some of what we have, if not a lot of it, isn't closed captioned. So I'm going to need to go back today and make that tweak, because you're going to go there and that's going to be the first thing you say. So I'm actually seeing right now in real time the need for that. So I'm getting some groans from the audience, I think. So I will fix that, and we will go back and talk about that as a team. But it's designed to help you do your jobs better. There are actually a lot of great visuals there, and a lot of it is text-based. So as people are speaking on the screen, we've done some animated text that highlights the key ideas. So we've done some things for 508 compliance, but there's probably even more we could do. We could just even use the YouTube videos and turn on that closed captioning. So, but please check that out. The idea is this will be Coursera or Khan Academy for government. Hundreds of free courses. We have about a dozen now. We'll have 25 at launch. We're going to have 100 by the end of the year in the academy. One other quick note on that is we have partnered with other organizations like the American Association of Budget and Program Analysis to create courses with them. So if, as an organization, there are courses that you would want the rest of government to be aware of, topics that are important to you, where you could educate the rest of government employees, I would be open to partnering with you on that and exploring that kind of course or that kind of online training. Sorry, one other quick note on it is that it's not like your page turner stuff that you see online, like the boring online training that you typically see in government. This is 2 to 3 minute lessons where there's maybe some narrated slides followed by a video of somebody speaking about their real experience in government. 3 minutes tops. Watch 10 lessons. You can watch 2 or 3 on your lunch hour, 2 or 3 on your commute. You take 3 courses, you complete a learning path, and you get a badge. So we're really trying to design it so that it's short, quick, real-time, bite-size, and gamified learning. Now let's say you want to position yourself as an expert in your field. We right now have actually, you can see the date here, we are doing a call for featured bloggers. If you're smart on a particular topic, you're an expert, or you want to position yourself like I did to sort of learn about something and then share what you're learning, and position yourself as a thought leader, please throw your hat in the ring to be a featured blogger on Govloop. Also, we recently launched a campaign. If you'd be interested in contributing in another way, there are several other ways. You could present at one of our online trainings. You could speak at one of our in-person events in DC. You can share insights, as I mentioned, for our Govloop Academy courses. You could be interviewed for one of our upcoming research guides. Or, again, as I mentioned, be a featured blogger. There are a variety of different ways that you can get involved with us. Next, how many of you think that USA Jobs is broken? We thought so. So what we did was we got the API for the job feed, and we created a brand new experience for government job search. It's called jobs.govloop.com. Jobs.govloop.com. It's like a mashup of like Expedia and USA Jobs, if you could. Like, as you're looking for jobs, you can see the experience right there in the middle. It's more like, Travelocity, where you have like the slider bars, and you can sort of, it's a better user experience than what you'd see. It's more modern user experience than what you'd see on USA Jobs. We also integrated LinkedIn. So let's say you're interested in a particular job. You see the job listing and you see a particular job at an agency. It shows the people that you might know or be connected to on LinkedIn. It also, we've mashed it up with Glassdoor. So if somebody has given ratings on that particular agency, you can see their comments and their ratings on that agency. So we just tried to do something a little creative, a little unique and innovative to make your experience of job searching better. So I'd encourage you, again, free. Everything I've talked about is free. Also, we are right in the midst now of doing selections for our mentors program. The deadline passed on Monday, but if you come to me again afterwards and you'd want to be part of that program, or you shoot me an email at andrew@govloop.com and you said, hey, I heard you speak at Deaf and Hard of Hearing Government, the one-day summit, I will make sure that you're considered as part of the selections process. It's competitive. We have 400 applications right now for only 75 to 100 slots. But I will accept your application to be considered. We have our selections this afternoon, but I would still, again, put you in the pool for consideration if you contacted me directly. It's a great program. It lasts 6 months. We're doing, like I said, selections right now. Then we'll do matching in a couple weeks. Then we have a kickoff event in early May here in DC. We also do it virtually. 6 months of time with your mentor. Usually you meet every other week. We send communications tips for questions to ask, topics to address in your time together. And then we have 2 other events, sort of a midpoint event, about the 3-month point. We try to bring in somebody inspiring. Actually, last year at our midpoint event, we had 2 folks from NIH. We had an executive coach who's written a book on the subject of sort of advancing your career. What's your why, or why it matters, it's called. And then her husband is an award-winning mentor here. And they sort of, as a married couple, spoke her about her book, and then he about how he's applying that in his life in overcoming adversity. He is, in fact, paraplegic, and he's like a record-setting, like world record-setting marathoner. So he was able to sort of take the lessons from the book and show how he's overcome adversity in his own life. So that's the type of speaker that we try to bring to that event. So it's sort of one part inspirational, one part informational. And then it's obviously great networking to meet people from across government. So in the last couple weeks, you can see March 11th, Sabrina posted a blog and said, hey, thank you, Govloop, for all that you've done to help me to advance my career. What I love about it is that it's people like me. We're all looking for resources. We're all looking to share knowledge. We're all trying to help one another to advance our government careers. And she has pretty much leveraged everything that we do. I just was looking at her blog post again this morning. She looks at our research guides all the time. She was a participant in our mentors program. She was a featured blogger. And she's attended our Next Generation of Government Training Summit, which is an in-person event, a 2-day in-person event we host every summer, end of July. You can look that up. NextGenGovT.com, NextGenGovT.com. That is the only thing that we do where there's a fee. But most agencies, if you're a rising leader in government, are eager to send you to that training event. So she attended NextGen, and she's attended a lot of our online trainings, and she said this has just been an amazing resource to help her advance her career. So just a real-time story. So let's talk about Facebook. I want to talk about Facebook from a different perspective. Maybe not how it will help you, but how it can hurt you. Whether or not it's fair, whether or not it's legal, we all know that employers are conducting a search when they get your application. They go through a pile of resumes. They get down to their final few applicants, and then they're doing a Google search, aren't they? And if your Facebook profile is in any way visible, they're going to be looking at that. They're going to be looking at LinkedIn. They're going to see what else they can find on you to be able to get a better sense of who you are as a candidate. We all know that we put our best foot forward in resumes. So, you are you, though, typically in a place like Facebook. So they're going to find out who you are. And 1 in 3 employers reject applicants based on their Facebook posts. So it's worth taking into consideration that as you're thinking about moving to that next job, or even if you aren't, but you will be a few years down the road, this is a reality. So what hurts most? Apparently provocative, inappropriate photos and comments will hurt you. I guess a photo's worth 1,000 words, and it's probably 1,000 daggers in this case. This one seems like a no-brainer, but, drinking or using drugs, not good. I mean, I don't know who's posting that they're doing that stuff on Facebook, but pretty unwise. Clearly, you're going to not get the job, or you could lose your job over something like that, right? And then you can see, just like if you're not using good English, that might be a red flag for an employer. If you're talking negatively about a previous employer or your current employer, that would be a turnoff clearly to the next employer, but it could get you fired on your job. There's decent legal case studies around people who have used social media, and the employers have been justified in being able to relieve them of their duties. Obviously, any discriminatory comments, or if you're lying about your qualifications, and that's pretty clear on Facebook. These are all things that we recommend not doing on Facebook. So if you got that out there, go delete it, fix it, do whatever it takes to help yourself there. So what helps is where people are getting a good feel for your personality, if you convey a professional image. So you might think, yeah, but this is my personal space. I'm going to be who I am on Facebook. Doesn't matter to an employer. They're looking to see who you are. And so those who are conveying a more professional image across their life, in some ways shows integrity. Shows that who I am on the job is who I am in real life. And if I'm showing signs of being a person who lacks integrity in real life, will I bring that to my job? So just being professional across the board, being an up-and-up person, I guess, is important. Seems, again, intuitive, but some people, I guess, aren't as careful. So if you're giving some background information that is supported by what's being shown on Facebook, if you're showing that you're well-rounded, broad interests, you're going to be an interesting person to work with. Again, great communication skills. If you're creative, funny, interesting, some of that shouldn't matter maybe, but again, if you've been part of a job search on the other side, you know what you're looking for. You know that employers get intrigued by certain things about you and want to have you on their team. So be that intriguing person. So, just this re-emphasizes the point of a couple slides before where pictures can hurt or help you. And so, I don't know. Here's a few examples of good pictures. The green one with the green box around it. That's pretty tame. It's still personal, but tame. Probably the one with the bunny ears and the drinking. I mean, it's not that bad, but I mean, apparently, according to Gawker, this would be the type of photo that you'd probably want to keep private or not post. Maybe it's something you just can text all the people that you saw at that particular event instead of posting it publicly on Facebook. And then stuff that's neutral is the stuff with the blue box around it. I mean, if you're a fan of Alf, maybe the future employer is a fan of Alf, and they'll be like, we have to have this person at our organization because Alf rocks. I don't know. Oh, I'm a dog lover. They're a dog lover. Done. Hire them. I don't know. Maybe they're like babies. You have babies. I don't know. These could all be, qualifying conditions. Probably not legally justifiable, but some tips. Protect your privacy. If you want to post whatever you want, then make sure that it can't be found. There's actually a toggle button where you can say, I don't want this to be shown in search engines. Now, even though everybody knows, even though you sort of click that, there are images that you've posted, there are different things that once it's online, it's online. What happens online stays online forever. So, whatever you're posting, it can be either risk or reward. But privacy settings are one way that you can mitigate the risk side of that. The other thing you can do is just be strategic with lists. You can make sure that only certain people can see certain types of information. So if you don't want to go with the nuclear option, like no one can see anything on Facebook, you can get more granular and strategic and create lists. And then when you share stuff, you can share stuff only to particular lists. I know there are colleagues who do this. They make sure that me and the other members of the executive team can't see everything, because we'll hear about people saying, their colleagues talking about something they saw on Facebook, like, I didn't see that. That's because they were smart and they used a list to share only with certain people. One other quick note. I would say that it's okay, and this is a gray area, so we can talk about this more if you want. It's okay to friend up the chain. But I would even be careful there. But definitely what I've learned is that as a manager of a team of 10 people, it's not okay to friend down. They will feel an obligation to accept that friend request, even if they don't want to. And so I do not extend friend requests on Facebook to people who report to me. I do it with colleagues, people at my level and above, but I don't do it to people below. So if you are manager or supervisor, just a recommendation, best practice. And that's because I got feedback from an employee. I said, hey, I actually asked before I did it, can I friend you? And he said, I prefer that you don't. I'm like, well, I'm curious now what you're saying about me on Facebook or what you're posting there. But I honored it and I didn't request. He would have denied me anyway. So that would have been awkward all the way around. So, again, I'd be careful with friending colleagues. Maybe a professional relationship develops into something more personal, and it makes sense to be friends on Facebook. But generally, I feel like there's some gray area there. We wanted to have some caution. And then you might think of, as I do, that Facebook is only a place to post personally. I do sort of bifurcate. I sort of split my time. LinkedIn is definitely only professional, and Facebook is only personal. But there are apps on Facebook, like Branch Out, that allow you to combine your career networking and your professional networking with your personal activity. So if you'd like to do that, there are ways that you can do that. If you're looking for a job, I'd be a little careful about stating that publicly on Facebook, because an employer could see that, a current employer, unless, again, you're strategic with lists and privacy settings. But that could be a way. Hey, folks, know of any good openings at this agency or, in this job field? Facebook could be a place to do that, and it's a way of leveraging your closest contacts. But again, you'd have to be careful about what you're sharing. So let's talk about Google for a second. Have you Googled yourself lately? I try to do this once a month. At this point, it's not changing much. There was a point in my career about 5 or 6 years ago where I was speaking a lot more. This was pre-children. Scaled back some of my speaking gigs and in different sort of branding opportunities, if you will, some of the writing that I was doing. But at that time, I was doing a lot of writing for different publications and a lot of speaking. And so I'd be curious, where was I showing up? Or if I was being blogged about by another blogger, maybe I wasn't aware of it. Maybe they, referenced a blog post that I'd written or something. So I just kind of occasionally search to see, because there were a couple instances actually where somebody lifted an entire blog post and they didn't give me credit for it, or they used a slide deck of mine for a presentation and they didn't give me credit. So I was able to identify that by doing some regular searching. That might not be the case for you, but I think it is important to see, well, what would a potential employer or what would my current employer see, or a colleague see, if they Google search me? Maybe they're finding stuff like this. This is usually the top hits. One thing to consider is, what if I'm not being found at all? And can you take steps so that, because of some of the reasons I've mentioned, you would be found and it would provide a bit more information about who you are, a bit more color on you and your personality to a potential employer. Maybe you want to be found, and so maybe there's some ways where you can, again, update your LinkedIn profile or create a LinkedIn profile, or in other ways, position yourself effectively in a Google search. Another thing that I did was, so that I wouldn't have to conduct that search, physically do it, to see what the search results looks like, I would create an alert. And that's simply, and you can just like Google alerts, and find out how to do this. It's fairly simple. It's just like this. You just can sort of say, hey, you can put your name to find out if you're appearing anywhere. That, again, is less relevant for me now. So what's more relevant is doing it more topic-based. So let's say you want to get smart on a subject. You want to be up on the latest in your field. You can do that by putting an alert, and then you can put the frequency. It can be like real-time, weekly, digest, daily. There are different ways you can get that information delivered right to your inbox. This is a way to just get smarter on a subject too. If you want to see sort of like the latest research, if you're a scientist or something, you probably have other means and channels of doing that, but this could be another way of discovering things that maybe you weren't aware of that were out there. Because you can get some pretty sizable results, and so I just will quickly kind of scroll through and see if there's anything interesting, and then read those articles. The other thing that you can do, this is where it starts getting interesting, is when you can be sort of the first to see information if you get the real-time updates, and then maybe you're sharing that on LinkedIn, an article that you saw to your connections on LinkedIn or on Twitter. You're sharing that to your followers, and you're providing value to others. You're being the one who is sort of leading the charge to see the new information and then share it to your community. So I think that's another way of leveraging alerts, not just for your own benefit, for the benefit of people in your network. I love Google Hangouts. I don't know if anybody uses Google Hangouts, but if you have Gmail, which I think a lot of us do, there's the chat feature, and obviously now they've integrated Google Hangouts into chat. But I've been a remote employee for almost 10 years. I live in Durham, North Carolina. I've been away from my primary organization for almost that entire time. I was at the Graduate School USDA for a year in person here in DC, and then moved to Durham for the next 4 years of my time there. Now at Govloop, I've been remote the entire time. And so Hangout is really a lifeline for me to be able to talk with my colleagues face to face. I'm up here a couple days every week, but on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, or the days when I'm typically not here, they'll bring me into meetings using Hangout, or I'll have my one-on-ones with my staff using Hangout, so we can get that face-to-face experience. The other thing you can do is, let's say you meet somebody on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, and you've never met them in person. This is about the closest you can get to approximating that in-person experience with them. Let's say you want to conduct an informational interview. This is a great way to do it using Google Hangout. Skype, obviously, is another way you can do that. What I do like about Google Hangouts is you can see here, the ability to have multiple people in the room. So also, more and more employers are starting to use stuff like Google Hangout for conducting interviews. So it might be good for you to get good at using this interface, I think a lot of times what we do when we're on video is we're looking at ourselves when we're talking, which is fine. You want to get a sense of how you're conveying, but also it's good to be practicing actually looking at the other person and reading their body language as you would in a true in-person interview. So make sure that you're viewing everybody on the screen, not just yourself. It's like when you look at a picture, you're looking for yourself. I think the same dynamic happens on video. So you want to make sure that you start practicing, particularly if you would have an informational interview or a real interview, job interview, that you're good at that. One quick note, YouTube being in the Google family. What a great opportunity for real-time learning. There are videos on virtually everything. I'm sure you've done this. You're like, man, I want to learn about a particular subject. I wonder if I can find something. You probably Google it, and then one of the top hits is a YouTube video. So I would suggest that you are intentional about that. Go to YouTube. And so this is just, like if you want to learn about federal acquisition, there's a series, a video series on YouTube where you can sort of get some quick hit, bite-sized information on that particular subject. In the home stretch here, Twitter. I feel like wouldn't be complete if I didn't at least touch on Twitter. So there was a great blog post by Dr. Mark Drapeau, also known as Cheeky Geeky, on Twitter, and he had lots more here. These are just a few of his bullets, but he called it "How to Win Friends and Twinfluence People." I'm not sure how that translates, twinfluence, into sign language, but this is some of his advice. Is just be unique, be yourself. Gets to the stuff we talked about earlier about giving some color on who you are and your personality. Biggest thing is to participate in conversations. What I found early on in Twitter, and still is kind of true, is people get they promote themselves. And I think what's a lot more effective on that channel is to comment on what other people are saying, and not just use it as a blast channel about yourself, but to truly engage in the conversation on Twitter. And therefore, you're sort of bringing value to a community. Again, I mentioned, maybe you read something from a Google alert, you share that on Twitter, and you become valuable to others. And so that's really number 5 here would be a way that you become an authority to others around you, or a thought leader. Find the influencers, and I'd actually say one of the best ways to stand out from the crowd with an influencer is to retweet them regularly. Again, back when I was writing and speaking quite a bit more, there was this one guy who he didn't retweet everything I tweeted, but like a lot of it. And it was kind of weird, kind of creepy, but at the same time, it was kind of cool. I was like, man, I kind of got like a raving fan here. This guy loves what I'm tweeting. So it's flattering. And so you can do that. I don't know if that's true with like celebrities, but if there's somebody who's sort of a C-level officer in government, who's maybe quasi-famous, they're high up, but they don't have as many followers, you can really stand out from the crowd by retweeting or commenting on what they've said. They'll start to notice you. I can guarantee that. And then there are a lot of, 2 other quick things. Twitter hashtags obviously are a way of getting on a channel where there's sort of multiple people that can see what you're saying. And then participate in live chats. For instance, on Thursday nights, there's something called Learn Chat, LRN chat, hashtag Learn Chat. It's a specific time every week, and you can connect with others in real time on that, sort of having a dialogue. We have a great guide as a resource. If you go to govloop.com/resources, new Twitter guide for government employees. We have the 12 commandments for government employees on Twitter. Then just former deputy CIO at General Services Administration, formerly in DC government. He said, I heard about my job vacancy. He went from DC government to GSA by seeing a job vacancy announcement on Twitter, and got it. He just left there actually to go to Box, but he'd been there for several years and got his job from Twitter. So I don't know where my time is, given that we were a little off when I started, but that's the end of my sort of canned remarks. Any thoughts or questions, ideas, your stories? How much time do we have, Ryan?
We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left.
please.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have, I guess, you talked about trainings and partnering with Deaf in Government, DIG. Would you consider providing trainings or maybe online trainings that would be in sign language for deaf people to access? Or would you be willing to caption your materials so we could access them? And then YouTube uses voice recognition software for their captioning services, but I'll be honest with you, it's not always accurate for giving us the message that's being voiced. So would you be able to provide something like that for our community?
I love that idea. I don't know if I have internet access or could show you something, but since we do a lot of video-based content, whoever would be a point of contact, let's do a pilot. Let's do like a 4 or 5 minute video where there's a topic that you think would be popular for your community and the broader government community. And maybe there'd even be a way to do like a split screen. I think that'd be really interesting. Maybe you have a person on video, and then you'd have like the split screen, like another video embedded where the person would be doing the sign language that coincides with what the person is saying on the regular video. I'd love to test something like that. I think that would be a really interesting project. So yes. And then if anybody would be willing to be a user, sort of test user for us and consult with us on how to make things more effective, I'd be open to that as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For a question, you mentioned about Facebook and posting personal information there. There's information on Facebook that is even more personal than you mentioned, like home addresses and the location of where a person is at. Do you think that's the type of information I should be putting? Like, if I work for the Department of Defense, should I put that on my Facebook? Or should I just say something more general, like I work for the federal government? Is it smart or wise to put the agency you work for on Facebook?
I think there's a sensitivity being a government employee. I think it depends on what your role is. I think the average government employee, most government employees probably don't have a problem with it. But if you're at an intelligence agency, or you're at Department of Defense, or agencies like that where you feel like your mission could be compromised, or you could be at risk for cybersecurity issues, I'd exercise caution. If you want to keep it general, and I know people who do that on LinkedIn. If you're in that type of specialized field or specialized agency, the people who want to find you will find you and know how to find you. And you can protect yourself from the people who you don't want to have find you. I think that's probably, my gut is that's wisdom. And that'd be the direction I'd go.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, I have a question. Sorry, let me come closer. My name is Roberta Mather, and I'm the marketing officer for the Department of State. I've been struggling with LinkedIn specifically because of the association that I might have there. And this is a little bit controversial, but I'm in a field that has nothing to do with deaf issues, but I have a lot of friends who, in essence, are very involved with deaf companies or the deaf employees. So I feel like it's a completely typecasted scenario as a deaf person. I want to be seen as a marketing officer. I want to be seen as a person who's focusing on international relations. So what should I do about friends that are requesting me on LinkedIn as part of the deaf community? Should I be selective about who I pick to be my friend, or should I just accept all of them? How do I make those decisions? It's a very tricky situation I've been put in because some of them are my friends, but they're not within the same career field that I am. And then I have a second question about Govloop. You talked about thought leaders, and how people can contribute to that skill because as a government employee, we're the SME, the subject matter experts. But we have to require a lot of clarity to contribute content to the public. So how does that work for people who have ideas, who want to share them, but are probably required a lot more clearance from their agency to get those new ideas out there? So those are my two questions.
Great. No, the first one I would answer in this way. If there's an employer, I think this is the underlying thought here, is that there might be an employer who would discriminate against you, right? I think that's implied here. Who might not hire you because you're deaf, right? And so you're saying, like, if I am connected...
Subliminal. It's subliminal knowledge.
Right. And so you'd want to protect yourself to be seen as like anybody else, any other candidate. I guess the first thought that pops in my mind is, would you really want to work for an employer or be considered by an employer who would in any way that would be a consideration for them?
That's
My
a good
gut
point.
is no.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say be who you are and be proud of that and connect with everybody that you know, because this is your network and this is who you are. And it's not worth working for an employer who wouldn't want you as you are. And if you had to hide that and then you were hired and then they would treat you differently, you know what I mean? I would just be who you are. So that's number one. And number two would be, for clearance, two things you can do. One, obviously you could talk to your marketing. So you know how it works in the public affairs shop. Get clearance with the public affairs. Just say, hey, this is what I'd be blogging about. It's topic based. It's not like about our agency. I'm not going to use case studies. I just have a bunch of ideas for the field. I could give you an outline of the 12 blog posts I'm going to write over the next few months. None of this is controversial or sensitive, or at least I don't perceive it to be. And the other thing I could say at the bottom of the blog post, if you'd like, agency, is this is my personal opinion. This doesn't reflect the opinion of my employer. I think you'd get slowed down too much if you vetted everything through them. So I think you'd want to just get their trust and buy-in on doing it, generally from an high-level outline, but then run with it.
Well, thank you. Hi there. I'm an HR specialist myself. So I work in recruitment and staffing. And at this current moment, I'm training my HR development skills. So I've been thinking about which is the most effective social media for me to leverage or to get involved with as a government agency employee. Do you have any statistics about which ones are most effective?
I don't know if I have any statistics, but my sense is there are probably some local organizations like SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, that would have a group on LinkedIn. You're probably already there. But it seems to me like LinkedIn doing a search on human resources professionals and starting to reach out to people, particularly like if you started looking at their profiles and you're like, I like what they do, or I like their agency, or I'd like to have a job like theirs one day. Like, reach out and just, say, hey, I'd love to do an informational interview with you. LinkedIn feels like it could work well for that. And then I think you could leverage Govloop for that as well. If you are looking to position yourself as a thought leader, again, Govloop could be a great way to blog. You wouldn't even have to be one of our featured bloggers, but just do some tests of sharing content. The other thing would just be to leverage LinkedIn and Govloop's discussion forums to ask questions of your peers. Again, I feel like the discussion forums are better on LinkedIn in groups. Govloop has a general discussion forum where you can ask your questions. We have groups as well. They're semi-active. They don't have all the spam that LinkedIn groups are, but they're not maybe as active. So just a couple thoughts. One other quick idea, Twitter might have like a live chat among HR professionals. Again, I don't know if it would be government specific, but I might do some searching on that, see what you could find.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, last question, please.
All right.
I really appreciated you coming in and speaking to us today. I've noticed that a lot of social media it exists in different platforms, and it takes a lot of time to be involved in them. And often we're working all day and we have our jobs, and I just don't want to have the need to be part of social media all day. But I've noticed that often there's a lot of activities going on, a lot of activity on social media. So what do you recommend is a safe, I guess, balance for participating, but not excessively?
That's a great question, and that's a great segue for me to end today. So, number one, and I actually had some notes on this, you don't have to do it all. I named 6 things, but clearly it's impossible to do your job, have real relationships, and do social media. Not that social media isn't real relationships, but you know what I mean. There are people, like I'm married and I have children, and I can't be on my phone all the time, or I probably wouldn't have a family anymore. Or if I were doing social media all the time, I probably wouldn't be doing my job very effectively. So I try to use social media at off hours, partially because that's the only time I have time, and really in between things, waiting in line at the store. I try not to steal from my family, and I try not to steal from my job. If you need a quick break or something on the job, I mean, go to your Facebook page, etc. But I think also this is something to consider is if an employer is concerned about your productivity, one of the first things they might do is see, is this person, like they might see like Facebook open on your screen or something and be like, maybe they're spending a little too much time there. And they're going to start looking at like the time of your posts, right? Or if you're on Twitter, I know people who are blogging on Govloop, and I'm astonished at how they're able to blog as much as they do. I'm like, how do they do their job? I mean, I appreciate you blogging on Govloop, but I'd rather have you doing your job. So that would be number one, is you don't have to do it all, and be very careful about doing things that would otherwise steal from the more important things in your life. This can be addictive. Let's be honest. And so you're going to have to be intentional about turning it off. Number two, and this is how I wanted to end today, was, again, I'm a big fan. Oh, one other thing on usage. I don't actually, you're going to go to Crazy Kriz, and you're going to follow me on Twitter, and you're going to be like, this dude doesn't even use Twitter anymore. That's right, because I don't have time for it. And I made an intentional choice to focus on Govloop and LinkedIn, where I know I have more leverage right now in my career. I'm not going to be able to leverage Twitter as well. I'm on Facebook. You can see I didn't put that up here because that's personal. I'm connecting with friends and family there. So I definitely sort of keep my social media worlds sort of separate and measured. Last thing, there's no substitute for in-person relationships. I'm a fan of social media, and you can use it to leverage your career. But I think the number one thing that you ought to do is leverage what you're doing in social media and the new relationships you're making to get in real time, to get face-to-face with people. There's nothing like the experience of knowing somebody from an avatar and seeing them for the first time in real life. I've been, friends with people on Facebook or followers on Twitter, and that's the only way we've known one another. Then we go to a conference, and when we see one another for the first time, it's like, oh, you're an old friend. This is great. But there's something about that connection that we make in person that then accelerates and just makes our online experience even more special and meaningful because we've met in person. So I would say that social media is never a substitute for real time. If you can leverage social media, get more real-time relationships. That's the way to go, because it's who you know, and I think it's who you know that's really real and in person that matters in the end. So thank you for your time today.